The morning mist clings to the edges of the tracks. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof rises, not with the roar of engines or the chatter of travelers, but in the quiet sigh of empty halls. Light glances off the glass roof, fractured in uneven rays, painting ghostly patterns on the cold stone. The benches sit vacant. The platforms, once a tide of movement and urgency, are still. Doors stand closed. The echo of footsteps long faded into memory. Outside, the city moves, indifferent, as if nothing monumental ever existed here. And yet it did. Once the station was not just a building, but a living organism, a grand artery through which the lifeblood of Germany flowed. People arrived here brimming with hope, urgency, or despair. Suitcases rattled, shoes scuffed polished floors, and voices collided in a symphony of motion. What now remains is hollow, and in that hollowness, a question lingers. How could something so central, so vital, be brought to ruin? Who allowed it to die while the world around it carried on? The story begins not with the train whistles or the glinting iron and glass, but with absence. There is an almost unbearable tension in walking these platforms. One imagines the crowd surging like water, only to realize that the water has receded, leaving jagged stones and silence in its wake. Every beam of sunlight seems to ask the same question. Why was this treasure abandoned? Why did people stand by while history unraveled within these walls? Inside, the waiting halls are cavernous. The ceilings arch upward, ambitious and proud, designed to lift the eyes toward possibility. Daylight filters through decades-old panes, but the air is stale, the hum of electricity faint. No conductor calls out a platform. No child tugs at a parent's sleeve. Only shadows stretch across the marble, remembering more than anyone present could. Here, in this absence, history is palpable. You can feel the weight of expectation, the pulse of countless journeys halted, diverted, or erased. It is impossible to ignore the ghosts of labor that once animated this place. Ticket clerks in crisp uniforms, their hands deft and practiced, issuing passage into the wider world. Porters pushing carts laden with packages, their wheels squeaking in unison across the polished floors. And above all, the travelers themselves, faces flushed with excitement, worry, or mourning, moving like a living river through this cathedral of transit. One can almost hear the collective sigh of a city, coordinated by the rhythm of arrivals and departures. That rhythm no longer exists. Silence occupies every corner. Yet, even in its emptiness, Hamburg Hauptbahnhof is monumentally alive. It watches. It remembers. Every stone, every iron girder carries the residue of an era defined by ambition and, ultimately, neglect. Consider the photographs from the 1920s. Packed concourses, elegant chandeliers, the sheen of freshly laid stone, and travelers moving as if in a carefully orchestrated ballet. Contrast that with the present. Graffiti streaks the walls, pigeons nest in the rafters, and the station's grandeur seems almost apologetic, a shadow of its former self. This is not decay in the natural sense. It is abandonment, human in origin, deliberate in effect. Even a casual visitor senses the moral dimension in the air. Something precious was lost here, and not because of time alone. The destruction did not happen in a moment of war, though war left its scars. It was a slow erosion of care, a neglect that speaks to choices made, priorities misplaced, and the quiet consent of those who could have intervened but did not. The station's ruin is not merely architectural. It is a societal failure etched into stone, iron, and glass. Outside, the city hums with normality, but inside, a strange dichotomy persists. The station is both monument and mausoleum. Its platforms are graves of opportunity, corridors echoing with unspoken narratives. One imagines a child clutching a mother's hand, a soldier in uniform, a businessman hurrying to a meeting, all momentarily united under the roof's vast span. And then the war came, then the neglect, and the unity dissolved into fragmented memory. The question remains, could a society capable of building such beauty allow it to vanish? To understand what was lost, it is necessary to confront the sensory reality of its prime. Imagine the smell of coal and oil mingling with polished wood and hot metal. Hear the shrill whistles of locomotives, the clatter of wheels against tracks, and the chorus of human voices. See the light glinting off bronze fixtures, the flags of the German Empire fluttering in the main hall, the advertisements and timetables lined with meticulous care. It is a scene of precision and poetry, a cathedral dedicated to movement. Now, juxtapose that with the hollowed emptiness today. The contrast is jarring, a visual metaphor for the moral questions embedded in its decline. The station's architecture itself embodies a narrative of ambition and oversight. The glass roof, once intended to bring clarity and light, now diffuses sunlight unevenly through dust and decay. The iron beams, designed to hold vast spans of space aloft, groan silently under the absence of human presence. It is as if the building mourns itself, retaining the dignity of design while silently indicting the society that abandoned it. Every detail of construction, every bevel, every arch, every line of tile, speaks to an era that sought permanence, but achieved only impermanence. Even in stillness, the station exerts a haunting power. Walk its corridors, and one begins to sense the lives that intersected here, the decisions made in haste or with care, the destinies shaped, delayed, or destroyed. Letters found in archives recount passengers' anxieties, hopes, and farewells. Journalists of the time described a bustling hub, alive with energy and yet fragile, a tension between human ambition and structural reality. These testimonies whisper from the past, reminding us that what appears inevitable in retrospect was never so. Choices, human and moral, matter profoundly. And so the question lingers, like a low hum under the vaulted roof. How does a society allow its own marvels to die? Was it war alone? Or was it something more insidious? A failure of conscience, a lapse in civic duty, a willingness to trade heritage for convenience or profit? As the mist lifts from the platforms, one cannot escape the truth. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof's emptiness is a story not just of trains and architecture, but of values lost in transit, of decisions deferred until it was too late to reverse them. The station stands silent, but it speaks. In this silence, the viewer must confront the moral core of the narrative. The station's ruin is not merely a historical footnote. It is a mirror reflecting human choices, societal priorities, and the quiet complicity of a city that watched while a jewel slipped from its grasp. As one walks through the deserted halls, the question resonates with growing intensity. Who bears responsibility for loss of such scale? And what does the disappearance of this grand railway station reveal about us? Now, in the present, as we pass by without noticing, the mist is beginning to burn away. Sunlight catches the edges of glass and steel. The platforms, empty but not inert, shimmer faintly. The station waits, as it has waited for decades, for someone to see it truly, to feel the weight of its absence, and to reckon with the human hand that allowed this to happen. And in that waiting lies the story to be told. The story that begins here, in the silence, with a question that will haunt long after the cameras leave. What is the cost of abandoning our own history? Long before the first train hissed in a Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, the city was a maze of canals, merchants, and the restless pulse of Northern Europe's trade. Hamburg was not merely a city, it was a gateway. Ships from the Americas, the Baltic, and the far reaches of the continent converged here, spilling their cargo and ambition onto cobblestone streets. The wealth was tangible, stacked in warehouses, glittering in the facades of merchants' homes, and whispered in the ambitions of civic leaders who dreamed of a metropolis that could rival London, Paris, and Vienna. Yet the city's growth was constrained. Narrow streets and fragmented quays suffocated commerce, and the riverbanks, while picturesque, could not sustain the modern scale of trade the industrial age demanded. Something monumental had to rise, something that would impose order on chaos and signal Hamburg's arrival as a hub of industrial and cultural significance. In the late 19th century, Germany was a nation in the throes of transformation. The Kaiserreich was young, proud, and intent on proving itself to the world. Railroads were the arteries of empire, not merely conduits of commerce, but symbols of progress, unity, and national pride. The citizens of Hamburg, ambitious and cautious, recognized the necessity of a central railway station, a place where ambition could be quantified in stone, iron, and glass. Here, modernity would meet utility, and the city would broadcast its significance on a continental stage. The decision to build Hamburg Hauptbahnhof was political, economic, and architectural. A consortium of railway companies, the Hamburg, Altona, Kiel, Lübeck, Hamburg, and Berlin Hamburg lines, vied for control over passenger flow, freight, and influence. Each sought to cement its role in the city's lifeblood, but competition alone could not dictate the scale and style of the station. Civic leaders insisted that the structure reflect Hamburg's identity: cosmopolitan, industrious, yet disciplined. Architects were commissioned to translate these aspirations into steel, glass, and marble. The project became a battle of vision, ego, and technological innovation. Johann Georg Pape, one of the leading architects of the era, was entrusted with crafting the station's face. Pape was a man of contradictions, meticulous yet daring, conservative in materials yet audacious in scale. He envisioned a structure that combined neoclassical dignity with the technological prowess of industrial modernity. High vaulted ceilings, intricate ironwork, and expansive halls would communicate order and grace. But beneath the aesthetic lay a functional rigor. The tracks, the switches, the platforms, each calculated to maximize efficiency and connectivity. Pape understood that grandeur alone would not suffice. The station had to function as the city's circulatory system. The chosen site reflected both pragmatism and symbolism. Placing the station at the nexus of existing lines required clearing centuries-old neighborhoods, displacing workshops, inns, and modest residences. This was not a simple engineering task. It was an act of urban transformation, a deliberate rewriting of the city's geography. Some citizens resisted. Letters to newspapers complained of lost livelihoods and demolished history. But the economic arguments were overwhelming. Hamburg needed a station that could accommodate the surging populations, the growing freight demands, and the prestige the city craved. The decision was made, and the city acquiesced, balancing nostalgia against progress. The construction itself was an epic of human labor. Tens of thousands of workers were employed over a decade. Steel beams rose like skeletal fingers, scaffolding crisscrossed the skyline, and furnaces burned night and day to forge the iron that would hold the glass vaults aloft. Stonecutters shaped marble and sandstone with painstaking precision. Masons laid tiles in geometric patterns that would guide the eye and signify order. And amid this chaos of labor, engineers coordinated the future of rail traffic, ensuring that the station would not merely impress, but function flawlessly. Diaries and contracts reveal the immense human effort, workers enduring long hours, extreme weather, and the constant hum of industry. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof was as much a testament to human toil as it was to architectural vision. Yet ambition carries risk. The design demanded innovation on a scale rarely attempted. Glass roofs of unprecedented span, iron trusses calculated to millimeter precision, platforms aligned for optimal flow. All of these required not only skill, but foresight. Errors would be costly. Miscalculations could imperil lives. And in the rush to assert dominance and modernity, compromises were inevitable. Some materials were substituted for cheaper alternatives. Certain structural redundancies were eliminated to reduce cost. It was a careful negotiation between aspiration and reality, a tension that would echo in later decades. The cultural significance of the station was immediate. Hamburg was a port, yes, but it was also a stage. The Hauptbahnhof would be where the city greeted diplomats, artists, and merchants alike. It would witness the comings and goings of soldiers, travelers, and immigrants. The station was not merely a building. It was a narrative device, articulating the story Hamburg wanted the world to see. Guidebooks boasted of its scale, newspapers praised its elegance, and the citizens, many of whom had been relocated for its construction, walked its halls with a mixture of pride and resignation. Human ambition and civic vision intertwined here. The station was conceived as a bridge between eras, a structure that would accommodate the modern industrial world while projecting an image of cultivated sophistication. Every marble column, every wrought iron beam, every pane of glass was a statement of intent. The planners wanted Hamburg to assert itself, to be both functional and symbolic, both practical and aspirational. The result was a structure that seemed inevitable once completed, yet its creation was anything but certain. Even as the station took shape, there were murmurs of concern about scale and cost. Journalists questioned whether the city had overreached. Some citizens lamented the disruption of neighborhoods. Historians later noted the irony. A station built to unify, streamline, and modernize, yet it required fragmentation, displacement, and compromise to exist. These tensions, the promise of grandeur weighed against human cost, would become a recurring motif in the station's history. By the day it opened, Hamburg Hauptbahnhof was more than a station. It was a triumph, a testament to vision, labor, and civic ambition. Its grandeur announced to the world that Hamburg had arrived. Yet beneath the celebration lay the moral complexity of progress. The displaced families, the laborers who toiled in harsh conditions, the compromises that hinted at vulnerability. The station, for all its elegance, bore silent witness to these tensions from the very beginning. And so the origins of Hamburg Hauptbahnhof are inseparable from the human ambitions, contradictions, and blind spots that shaped it. It was a product of its time, a city striving for prestige, a nation asserting itself through technology, and a society willing to balance progress against the human cost. This foundation, both literal and metaphorical, would dictate not only the station's rise, but its vulnerabilities, setting the stage for the dramas, triumphs, and eventual tragedies that were yet to unfold. When Hamburg Hauptbahnhof opened its doors, it was not merely a station, it was a declaration. The marble floors gleamed under the filtered sunlight of the immense glass vaults. Brass fixtures glinted with meticulous polish, their curves catching the eye, guiding the gaze upward to iron arches that seemed to suspend time itself. The air was filled with a constant hum, the hiss of steam, the squeal of wheels, the murmur of voices speaking in German, French, English, and languages from distant ports. Each sound was purposeful, contributing to a symphony of organized chaos, a rhythm that both reassured and exhilarated. To stand in the main hall was to witness humanity in motion, a choreography of ambition and urgency, elegance and function interwoven into a living tableau. By the early 20th century, the station had become a nexus not only for transportation, but for social and cultural life. Citizens referred to it simply as the portal to the world. Businessmen hurried through its corridors, briefcases clutched tight, eyes fixed on timetables that orchestrated international commerce. Students and young professionals poured in from the surrounding provinces, their ambitions carried on the rails. Families, often traveling for the first time, clutched tickets, and children alike, their excitement palpable, leaving behind the rhythm of everyday life for the promise of connection. The station's design amplified this experience. Long corridors lined with polished tiles guided travelers efficiently to platforms, yet each turn revealed architectural surprises. Arched ceilings, ornamental cornices, and murals depicting the triumphs of German industry. One could pause, if only briefly, to witness the careful integration of function and aesthetic, the way light poured through expansive windows, illuminating intricate ironwork and casting shadows that danced across polished floors. It was an environment built not just for movement, but for awe, a subtle assertion of Hamburg's identity as a city of ambition, wealth, and sophistication. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof's platforms were the stage for countless human stories, each arriving and departing in bursts of movement that made the station feel alive. Consider the account of Heinrich Schulze, a young clerk who kept a detailed diary of daily life in 1912. He wrote of a morning when the station received a visiting delegation from the Kaiser's administration. Soldiers in impeccable uniforms marched past travelers, while the scent of coal and engine oil mixed with polished leather and newspaper ink. Schulze noted the simultaneous spectacle and precision, the way a crowd moved in near-perfect synchrony, The way station staff orchestrated departures without visible strain. The station breathed like a living organism, he wrote. Each train a pulse, each whistle a heartbeat. The station's role extended beyond mere transit. It was a venue of human drama, witness to farewells and reunions, births of ambition and the quiet despair of misconnections. Lovers embraced on the platforms, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for years. Soldiers departed for distant fronts, their uncertainty mirrored in the glances of mothers and wives. Merchants arrived with cargo destined for distant markets, while artists, performers, and intellectuals passed through, contributing to Hamburg's cultural vibrancy. Every day, the station was both mundane and extraordinary, the ordinary rhythms of life amplified by the grandeur of its architecture and the scale of its operations. Special events further cemented the station's status as a landmark of prestige. On one notable occasion in 1925, President Friedrich Ebert visited Hamburg, his entourage passing through the Hauptbahnhof to great fanfare. Newspapers documented the polished reception, guards in formal dress, steam engines meticulously prepared, and citizens lined along platforms to glimpse the head of state. These ceremonial moments transformed the station into a public theater, its spaces choreographed for spectacle. The architecture itself participated in the narrative. Vaulted ceilings framed the procession, polished floors reflected the uniformed figures, and every angle seemed calculated to amplify grandeur. The station was also a technological marvel, its operational systems reflecting a mastery of complexity rarely seen at the time. Switches, signaling mechanisms, and ticketing procedures were synchronized to manage thousands of passengers daily, along with freight operations that demanded near-military precision. Telegraph lines connected platforms to offices and distant depots, ensuring communication and coordination. Engineers, planners, and clerks moved in concert to maintain the station's pulse, and the result was an infrastructure that functioned with the elegance of a carefully composed symphony. The sensory impact of this operational mastery cannot be overstated. The hiss of brakes, the clatter of wheels, the measured cadence of departure announcements. It was music, precise, exhilarating, alive. Human observers recognized the cultural significance immediately. Travelogues of the era describe awe and admiration for the station's scale and efficiency. Visitors marveled at the sheer coordination of human and mechanical forces, the way steam and steel, light and sound, intersected seamlessly. Artists sketched the vaulted ceilings, capturing the interplay of shadow and structure, while photographers documented the throngs of travelers, preserving images of humanity in perpetual motion. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof was not just a functional building. It was a canvas for life's drama, a stage for commerce, culture, and human aspiration. Yet within this flourish of activity lay an undercurrent of vulnerability. The very ambition that gave the station its grandeur, its scale, complexity, and integration, made it dependent on constant maintenance, continuous labor, and uninterrupted management. Any disruption, whether political, economic, or military, had the potential to unravel the delicate equilibrium that made the station extraordinary. And as the station rose to prominence, so too did its visibility, placing it at the heart of Hamburg's identity and, inadvertently, at the center of historical forces that would later threaten its existence. By the 1930s, the station had fully cemented its role as the lifeblood of Hamburg. Daily, it orchestrated thousands of arrivals and departures, facilitating commerce, travel, and cultural exchange. Families, traders, students, and politicians alike passed beneath its vaults, all bound by a shared infrastructure that made human ambition tangible. The experience of being inside the Hauptbahnhof at this time was both sensory and emotional. The scent of coal and polished wood, the echo of shoes on marble, the glare of sunlight through iron and glass, and the collective energy of countless lives moving in coordination. It was a place of kinetic poetry, a site where human intention and architectural brilliance converged to shape the city itself. To witness Hamburg Hauptbahnhof in its golden era was to see a society asserting its identity through infrastructure. It was more than efficiency. It was a statement of order, ambition, and pride. Citizens, travelers, and visitors recognized that within these walls, something extraordinary was unfolding daily. A choreography of human endeavor, a testament to the marriage of vision and labor. And in that rise, in that exuberant orchestration of life and movement, one can perceive the fragile beauty of human creation at the apex of its purpose, before the shadow of history began to intrude. Beneath the grandeur of Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, a different story quietly unfolded, hidden in plain sight. The station's marble and iron, the polished floors and vaulted ceilings, concealed more than the infrastructure of transportation. They masked the costs, the compromises, and the human lives compressed by ambition. The laborers who built and maintained it did so under conditions that rarely enter public record. Diaries reveal the exhaustion, the accidents, the silent suffering of men and women whose contributions were vital, yet largely invisible. Children worked alongside adults in some of the workshops, their small hands gripping tools and metal under the unyielding demands of progress. The station's beauty depended upon a human ledger of fatigue, risk, and quiet sacrifice. Even the source of the funding was morally entangled. Hamburg's mercantile elite had poured capital into the station, not purely for civic pride, but to consolidate economic dominance. Certain railway companies exercised monopolistic control over routes and tariffs, quietly bending the levers of commerce to their advantage. Contracts reveal hidden clauses favoring specific freight lines, while local businesses displaced for construction were offered only minimal compensation. In newspapers, the project was lauded as a triumph of city planning. In municipal records, a ledger of compromise and profit quietly accumulated. The moral contradiction was embedded in steel and stone. A station celebrated for connectivity was built upon inequity. The design itself, while awe-inspiring, carried inherent risks. The sweeping glass roofs, iron trusses, and intricate structural arches were feats of engineering that left little margin for error. Inspectors' reports from the early 20th century reveal that certain beams were installed with calculated tolerance, but the rapid pace of construction occasionally required shortcuts. Engineers debated safety redundancies, balancing budget constraints against ideal structural resilience. The brilliance of the Hauptbahnhof, in other words, contained the seeds of vulnerability. Its elegance depended not only on aesthetic vision, but on the precise, uninterrupted labor that could never be guaranteed. Society's moral contradictions extended beyond construction. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof's operations mirrored the inequalities of the era. Ticket prices and service levels implicitly favored those of means. Second-class passengers endured crowded platforms, long waits, and slower carriages. The flow of wealth, power, and mobility was filtered through social hierarchies embedded in the station's very architecture. Observation decks and lounges reserved for elites overlooked platforms crowded with the working poor, a visible yet unspoken demarcation of privilege. The station's symmetry and order were a veneer, beneath which inequity pulsed persistently, unnoticed by most travelers dazzled by the structure's grandeur. War intensified these shadows. During the First World War, Hamburg Hauptbahnhof became a logistical hub for troop movements, munitions, and supply chains. Civilians were often displaced or inconvenienced, their concerns subordinated to national objectives. Historical letters recount the anxiety of families trying to catch trains while military operations overwhelmed the station. Soldiers arrived in uniform, exhausted and tense, mingling with ordinary travelers under the same vaults. The station became a theater in which human ambition collided with human vulnerability. It performed efficiently, but at the cost of ethical complexity, revealing the tension between civic pride and the often invisible weight it demanded from the population. Even in peacetime, shadows lingered. Political instability in the interwar period saw the station used for purposes both administrative and clandestine. Intelligence reports note the discreet passage of officials and activists, the quiet monitoring of crowds, and the undercurrent of tension that ebbed beneath the apparent rhythm of arrivals and departures. Every whistle, every train, every platform held dual realities: the visible narrative of progress and the hidden one of negotiation, coercion, and sometimes exploitation. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof was both theater and trap, a masterpiece of order overlaying an intricate web of human and structural compromise. The station's very magnificence helped obscure these contradictions. Visitors marveled at ironwork, glass vaults, and polished floors, rarely questioning the laborer's toil, the socioeconomic inequities, or the moral compromises embedded in its design. Tourism, press coverage, and civic celebrations reinforced the illusion of unmitigated triumph. Yet, those who worked behind the scenes, the clerks, porters, engineers, and maintenance crews, experienced the tension differently. One diary entry from a platform porter in 1928 reads, "We move the world beneath their feet, yet no one notices our presence. They see only what they are meant to see, and I fear it may always be so." And then there was the looming shadow of politics. Nationalism, militarism, and economic ambition coexisted uneasily within the station's operations. The Hauptbahnhof was not neutral. It was a stage for propaganda and power. Flags, announcements, and schedules broadcast efficiency and order, while the undercurrents of control, hierarchy, and selective access conveyed a subtler, more insidious message. The station's physical order belied the societal disorder it mirrored. Inequality, oversight, and ethical compromise were embedded into the very spaces where citizens moved with apparent freedom. Even its aesthetic triumph carried hidden vulnerability. Glass roofs, while magnificent, required constant maintenance to prevent leaks, rust, and collapse. Marble floors gleamed only through daily labor, polishing, and vigilance. Every element demanded human care, and any lapse could amplify danger. And yet, for decades, maintenance schedules were compromised, inspections deferred, and budgets trimmed. The grand gesture of architecture was intimately tied to ongoing human diligence, a reliance that would later prove catastrophic when attention wavered. By the 1930s, Hamburg Hauptbahnhof had become both symbol and paradox. It represented progress, connectivity, and sophistication. Yet beneath the surface, the shadows of inequity, risk, and moral compromise had grown. Laborers remained largely invisible. Wealth and mobility were unequally distributed. Political pressures and bureaucratic decisions prioritized image over substance. The station's brilliance was inseparable from its fragility, and the fragility was inseparable from human choice. The seeds of later tragedy were planted in these tensions, nurtured by a society willing to celebrate triumph while neglecting the costs. The viewer must now confront the duality of Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, a masterpiece that dazzled the world and a structure riddled with moral and structural shadows. Beauty and ambition, labor and exploitation, efficiency and inequality, all coexisted within its walls. To admire the station without acknowledging its hidden dimensions is to tell only half the story. In these contradictions lies the moral complexity of history itself, the knowledge that human creations, however magnificent, are never innocent. Every arch, every tile, every beam carries witness to compromise, and every step on its polished floors echoes with the quiet unease of what has been concealed. The moment of irreversibility came not with a single, dramatic act, but as a series of converging forces, subtle at first, then devastatingly clear. By the late 1930s, Hamburg Hauptbahnhof had already weathered political upheavals, economic crises, and social tensions, yet it still pulsed with human life. Crowds, steam, and announcements continued to animate the halls. Yet beneath the familiar rhythm, cracks were forming, both literal and metaphorical. Engineers had long warned that deferred maintenance, coupled with the immense stress of daily traffic, made certain structural elements precarious. The iron trusses that held the massive glass roof had begun to show fatigue. Tiles loosened underfoot. The first tremors were quiet, unnoticed by the millions passing through. But they were warnings, the station's silent pleas ignored by those in power. Then came the war. The Second World War transformed the station from a hub of daily life into a strategic asset and a target. Trains now carried soldiers, weapons, and refugees. Each carriage weighted not only with cargo, but with desperation. Air raid warnings became a new rhythm, the whistles signaling not departures, but imminent danger. Civilians were evacuated, yet the station could not be emptied entirely. the war demanded its continued operation. A telegram from the Reichsbahn headquarters in 1943 ordered that all trains, no matter the threat, continue as scheduled. Efficiency was demanded while humanity was endangered. The Hauptbahnhof became both a lifeline and a liability, a structure straining under moral and physical weight. The first bombs fell quietly, at night, while the city slept. Windows shattered, ceilings cracked, and a thin smoke began to stain the iron and glass. One eyewitness, a station porter named Wilhelm Krauss, later recalled, "We knew the rails would survive the steel, but the lives inside them, I don't think anyone could have prepared for that." Smoke, dust, and screams mingled with the scent of burning oil and wood. Platforms that had once been stages for orderly comings and goings became chaotic arenas of survival. The station's grandeur, its neoclassical dignity, was no shield against destruction. It became a trap, a vault in which human and structural fragility were exposed simultaneously. Yet physical damage alone was not the end. Administrative decisions accelerated the collapse. Wartime governance prioritized military objectives over civilian infrastructure. Maintenance schedules were abandoned, inspections deferred, and minor repairs ignored. Iron beams weakened further under the strain of overcrowded trains. Roof panels loosened. The very mechanisms designed to facilitate human movement, the signaling systems, track switches, ticketing machines, began to fail. Each decision to postpone repair, each command to maintain operations under duress, was a deliberate choice that edged the station closer to disaster. Then, in 1943, a major bombing raid reduced sections of Hamburg to rubble. Fires raged near the station, sending heat and debris into the iron framework. The Hauptbahnhof itself was damaged, but remained standing, a battered testament to both engineering and luck. The damage, however, had exposed the station's vulnerabilities. The combination of wartime strain, deferred maintenance, and the sheer magnitude of the structure meant that even minor shocks could now have catastrophic consequences. The station had entered a zone of irreversible instability. Human choices compounded the physical threats. Priorities were political and strategic, not practical or humane. Workers, conscripted into the war effort or replaced by laborers of varying skill, struggled to maintain operations. Supply chains for repair materials were disrupted. Decisions at the municipal and national level effectively ceded the station to the consequences of neglect, while rhetoric celebrated resilience and efficiency. The Hauptbahnhof became a symbol of endurance, even as it teetered on the edge of failure. The turning point crystallized in the winter of 1944. One particularly severe storm coincided with structural damage and operational strain. Roof panels loosened, platforms flooded from melting snow, and signaling systems faltered. Trains were delayed, passengers stranded, tensions high. An inspection report notes that engineers recommended immediate reinforcement of trusses and roof supports, warning that another incident could trigger partial collapse. The response from authorities was bureaucratic. Delays, excuses, promises of post-war repair. That deferment, that single moment of administrative inaction, marked the station's point of no return. And yet, life continued. People moved through the halls, children laughed despite the surrounding chaos, and trains arrived and departed against the odds. It was a surreal juxtaposition. Human vitality coursing through a building whose structural integrity and moral justification were both compromised. Photographs from the period show families boarding trains under the grandeur of arches marred by soot and cracked glass. The station's public face persisted, even as the undercurrents of ruin deepened. By the end of the war, the damage was undeniable. While parts of the station remained functional, the infrastructure that had supported its golden age, the finely tuned systems, the disciplined staff, the meticulous maintenance, was gone. Sections of the roof sagged, tracks were misaligned, and electrical systems faltered. The once celebrated symbol of Hamburg's ambition was now a relic, teetering between survival and collapse. And the moral turning point had been reached. Inaction, neglect, and human oversight had sealed the station's fate as much as bombs or fire. In the end, the Hauptbahnhof's decline was neither accidental nor immediate. It was the culmination of human choices layered upon physical stress. Each decision, postponing maintenance, prioritizing war logistics over civilian safety, deferring repair, ignoring early warnings, added weight to the inevitable. The station, a marvel of coordination and ambition, was undone not by a single catastrophe, but by the intersection of human negligence and the relentless pressures of history. As the smoke cleared over post-war Hamburg, the question lingered: could this hub of human ingenuity ever be fully restored, or had the moment passed forever? The answer would shape the city for decades, setting the stage for both reconstruction and abandonment. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, once a testament to ambition, now embodied the fragile intersection of human brilliance and human error, a warning that the grandeur of a structure is inseparable from the choices of those who maintain it. The first post-war winters were harsh on Hamburg Hauptbahnhof. The damage inflicted by bombs, fire, and neglect was evident in every corner. Jagged glass panes dangled precariously from the iron roof, tiles cracked under uneven weight, and water seeped into the marble floors, leaving stains that refused to fade. Staff shortages meant that minor issues went unaddressed. Roof leaks became rivulets cutting across platforms, and the intricate signaling systems, once a symphony of precision, faltered intermittently. Trains still arrived, still departed, but the rhythm was faltering, jerky, human lives caught in the pauses between machinery's failure. For those who remained, the clerks, porters, and engineers, the station was a landscape of quiet desperation. One veteran porter, Gustav Lenz, recounted the months after 1945. "We patched the floors with wood, propped up beams with anything we could find. The trains moved, yes, but it was as if the station itself was breathing unevenly, struggling to stay alive." The human cost was immediate and visible. Employees worked longer hours with fewer resources, often putting themselves at risk to maintain a building that was no longer fully functional. Accidents became more frequent. Minor collapses of ceiling panels, slipping on flooded floors, and the occasional electrical shock from failing wiring. Each incident reminded everyone present that the station's decline was no longer theoretical. It was real, unavoidable, and escalating. Meanwhile, the travelers themselves bore witness to deterioration. Commuters complained of delays, of broken seating, of drafty corridors that seemed to carry the chill of the war through every hall. Yet for many, the station remained a lifeline, a place of continuity amidst the fragmented city. Families returned cautiously, boarding trains to reunite with relatives, carrying luggage across cracked tiles and rusted platforms. Children ran, oblivious to the looming dangers, while older travelers glanced warily at sagging iron trusses above. Every departure and arrival carried the tension of survival as much as it did purpose, a constant negotiation between function and risk. Urban planners and city officials faced a brutal choice. Hamburg was rebuilding, and resources were scarce. The Hauptbahnhof was immense, requiring investment that could not be justified against housing shortages, bombed factories, and shattered infrastructure. Decisions were made to prioritize what seemed essential: utilities, roads, and temporary shelters. The station, for all its symbolic value, became a secondary concern. Repairs were partial, temporary fixes applied to critical areas only. The grandeur of maintenance, once a point of civic pride, gave way to expedience. And in every deferral, the station slipped further toward irretrievable decay. By the early 1950s, the transformation was visible to anyone passing through. Platforms, once polished, were worn and uneven. Ceiling panels were patched with mismatched materials. Walls bore graffiti, a testament to neglect and opportunistic vandalism. The iron skeleton of the roof, once celebrated for its elegance, now bore the weight of accumulated debris and disuse. Travelers noticed the decline. Newspapers printed editorials lamenting the station's fate. Yet commentary alone could not restore what had been lost. Human life continued, yes, but within spaces that were fraying, where every echo reminded visitors of the building's fading dignity. The most decisive blow came in the mid-1950s, when modernization projects bypassed preservation. Plans for a more streamlined commuter network required modifications to platforms, stairways, and entry halls. Historical features, ornamental arches, brass fixtures, and decorative stonework, were removed or covered in favor of industrial efficiency. Architects who valued heritage protested. Engineers argued pragmatism. Decisions prioritized function over memory, speed over history. Each alteration was small in isolation, but cumulative in effect, gradually stripping away the station's identity. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, once a coherent masterpiece, began to resemble a patchwork, its soul diluted in pursuit of practicality. The final stages of decay were punctuated by quiet abandonment. Cafes that had served travelers for decades closed. Ticket counters were automated or shuttered. Porters retired, replaced by machines and impersonal service. The station's heartbeat slowed. Platforms that had once thrummed with energy now echoed only with wind and footsteps. The city had moved on, and the station, a survivor of war and reconstruction, became increasingly irrelevant to daily life. Its size, once a marvel, now only emphasized emptiness. Rubble from minor collapses was removed hastily, leaving scars in the floors and walls. Pigeons nested in the rafters, turning the once glorious ironwork into perches of quiet decay. The glass vaults leaked, staining the marble and iron below. Maintenance crews became sparse, their labor symbolic more than restorative. Each passing year compounded the station's fragility. Each missed repair became a permanent mark of decline. The human cost was profound and intimate. Employees who had once been proud custodians of the station watched as their workplace eroded, day by day, under the weight of neglect. Families who relied on the station's convenience found themselves rerouted or delayed, their lives subtly reshaped by a building no longer capable of performing its central role. Witness accounts describe frustration, sorrow, and helplessness, a sense that a living organism, once vital and thriving, was now inert. And then, one day, the inevitability arrived. Machinery was brought in to remove sections of the damaged roof. Scaffolding creaked under its own weight, and the echoing halls seemed to hold their breath. Demolition teams carefully disassembled portions of the ironwork, while heavy equipment removed fallen masonry. The once grand platforms were stripped bare. What had survived fire, bombings, and human oversight was now deliberately dismantled. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof's decline, long anticipated and meticulously postponed, reached a finality that was both deliberate and devastating. By the end of the decade, the station was a hollow shadow of its former self. The corridors that had once carried ambition now carried silence. The platforms, stripped of ornamentation and grandeur, stood as a testament to both the inevitability of human neglect and the fragility of even the most monumental achievements. Employees were gone, crowds had thinned, and the city, focused on modern infrastructure, treated the station as a relic. What remained was structure without life, memory without guardians, and history without immediate witness. The doors had closed, but the stories of what had been, the triumphs, the labor, the moral compromises, remained etched in the walls, silent but unyielding. Today, Hamburg Hauptbahnhof stands as both a monument and a warning. The platforms stretch empty, polished stone marred by decades of neglect. The vaulted ceilings now fractured in places where glass has fallen or iron rusted. Light spills unevenly through gaps in the roof, casting long, irregular shadows that remind any visitor that this is no longer the hub of human activity it once was. Wind whistles through corridors once filled with conversation, and the faint echo of distant trains carries only the memory of what used to be. The station is a city's heartbeat turned into a ghost. It waits, silent, immovable, indifferent. Yet in that silence, the moral weight of its story presses upon the observer. Walking through the Hauptbahnhof today, one cannot help but confront the human choices that shaped its fate. The same hands that built it with care, ambition, and labor also deferred its maintenance, prioritized expedience over preservation, and ultimately allowed it to decay. Each marble slab, each iron beam, each carefully engineered vault bears witness not only to triumph, but to neglect, to the moral compromises embedded in every decision. The grandeur of design, once celebrated, now serves as a mirror, showing us the consequences of indifference and the fragility of human achievement when stewardship falters. The moral reckoning is not abstract. Families displaced, laborers injured or exploited, travelers inconvenienced, and workers who witness collapse all experience the human cost of abandonment. They remind us that buildings are more than stone and steel. They are repositories of human endeavor, of care, of attention. To allow them to fall into decay is to disregard those lives, to devalue the labor and intention invested in them. The Hauptbahnhof's emptiness is a silent indictment. Progress without conscience, ambition without responsibility, efficiency without humanity. Yet there is another layer, subtler and more unsettling. The station's decline was not only physical, it was symbolic. It reflected a society willing to move forward while leaving behind what it once held dear. The city rebuilt itself, modernized its infrastructure, expanded its economy, and yet chose to treat a masterpiece as expendable. The decisions were rationalized as pragmatism, necessity, or modernization, but in reality, they reveal a moral calculus that favored short-term gain over long-term preservation. The Hauptbahnhof's fall reminds us that the cost of neglect is never abstract. It is concrete, visible, and enduring. Looking up at the remaining arches, one imagines the crowds that once surged beneath them, families embarking on journeys, merchants racing to meet shipments, lovers bidding farewell. Their lives intertwined with the rhythm of the station, their ambitions supported by a structure designed to facilitate movement and aspiration. And now, that rhythm is gone. The human pulse that animated the space has been replaced by silence. Every echo reminds us that the station's decline was not an accident, but the cumulative result of countless choices, political, economic, and social, that favored convenience, expedience, and indifference over care. Historians and urban planners often debate whether restoration is possible or meaningful. Can the grandeur of the past ever be revived when the moral and social conditions that created it have vanished? The answer is partial at best. The architecture can be repaired, the structure stabilized, perhaps even revived in form. But the human story, the labor, the moral choices, the bustling life that once animated the station, cannot be reconstructed. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof exists now as an artifact, a reminder of the consequences when human vigilance lapses and societal values prioritize progress over preservation. And so, the station becomes a question, rather than merely a place. It asks us to confront our relationship with history and responsibility. How do we treat what we inherit? How do we honor labor, ambition, and ingenuity while navigating the pressures of modern life? The empty halls of Hamburg Hauptbahnhof speak louder than any monument. Beauty is fragile, achievement is fleeting, and the consequences of neglect are irreversible. The moral weight is ours, not the station's. It challenges every visitor to recognize that the abandonment of human achievement is not inevitable. It is a choice. In standing amidst its ruin, the observer cannot escape the quiet verdict of history. We destroy what we fail to protect. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof teaches that loss is rarely sudden. It is deliberate, incremental, and sanctioned by inaction. The station's emptiness is not merely absence. It is testimony. And in that testimony lies a question that endures long after the echo of footsteps has faded, long after the city has moved on. When confronted with what we have built, what we value, and what we love, will we act to preserve it, or will we watch it vanish and bear witness in silence? The answer is the measure of a society, and it is still being written.